There's a berry growing in West Africa right now that makes lemons taste like lemonade without adding a single grain of sugar. You bite into this small red fruit, chew it for 30 seconds, and for the next 2 hours, everything sour that touches your tongue transforms into something impossibly sweet. Limes taste like candy. Vinegar tastes like honey. Grapefruit tastes like the sweetest orange you have ever eaten. No sugar is added. No artificial sweetener is involved. No chemical reaction takes place outside your own mouth. The berry simply rewires your taste perception temporarily through a protein that scientists still do not fully understand. The effect wears off after 1 to 2 hours, and your taste returns completely to normal. No side effects have ever been documented in centuries of human consumption. West African tribes have used this berry for generations beyond counting. They chew it before meals to make bland food enjoyable. They give it to children to make bitter medicine tolerable. They consider it so ordinary that European explorers who first documented it in 1725 could not convince anyone back home that such a fruit could possibly exist. The berry is called miracle fruit. In 1968, an American entrepreneur named Robert Harvey discovered this fruit and recognized immediately what it could mean for millions of diabetics who could never taste sweetness without endangering their lives. He founded a company, developed extraction methods, and prepared to introduce miraculin to the American market as a revolutionary sugar alternative. Then, the FDA made their move. In 1974, the agency that is supposed to protect American health classified miracle fruit as an untested food additive requiring years of expensive trials before approval. The classification killed Harvey's company overnight. His investors vanished. His research was abandoned. His files were burglarized under circumstances that remain unexplained to this day. The $100 billion sugar industry never had to compete with a berry that makes sugar unnecessary. This is the story of miracle fruit, the plant that could have transformed how diabetics experience food, and the regulatory decision that made sure you would never learn its name. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Let's begin. The science of miracle fruit centers on a protein that should not be able to do what it does. The active compound is called miraculin. It is a glycoprotein molecule discovered and isolated by Japanese scientist Kenzo Kurihara in 1968. The protein itself has no taste whatsoever when it contacts your tongue. It does not taste sweet. It does not taste sour. It does not taste like anything at all. But miraculin does something remarkable when it binds to your taste receptors. The protein attaches to the sweet taste receptors on your tongue and changes their shape at the molecular level. Normally, these receptors respond only to sugar molecules and artificial sweeteners. After miraculin binds to them, they begin responding to acids instead. Every sour food contains acid. Citric acid in lemons and limes, acetic acid in vinegar, malic acid in green apples, tartaric acid in grapes. When these acids contact miraculin-modified receptors, your brain receives signals identical to those produced by sugar. You perceive sweetness that does not exist in the food itself. The binding is temporary but remarkably persistent. Miraculin remains attached to your taste receptors for approximately 1 to 2 hours depending on individual physiology. During this window, every acidic food you consume triggers sweet sensation. The effect gradually diminishes as the protein molecules release from receptors and are washed away by saliva. No calories are consumed beyond the berry itself. A single miracle fruit contains approximately 1 calorie. The transformation of taste involves no additional sugar, no artificial sweetener, and no metabolic impact whatsoever. A diabetic patient could experience the sensation of eating sweet desserts while consuming only sour fruits that do not spike blood glucose. This metabolic neutrality is what made miracle fruit so threatening to established industries. A technology that provides sweetness without sugar undermines every company that sells sugar and every company that sells sugar alternatives. The economic implications were enormous enough that powerful interests could not allow miracle fruit to reach the American market. The history of miracle fruit in West Africa stretches back centuries before European contact. The botanical name Syncypalum dulcificum was assigned by Western scientists, but the fruit itself has names in dozens of African languages that predate colonial documentation. Indigenous peoples across the tropical belt of West Africa, from Ghana to Congo, independently discovered the fruit's remarkable properties. The knowledge was so widespread and so ancient that no single origin story exists. Every culture in the region simply knew that this berry changed how food tasted. Traditional uses centered on practical nutrition challenges. Sour palm wine became drinkable without fermentation. Bitter medicinal plants became tolerable for sick children. Bland staple foods became enjoyable during seasons when flavorful ingredients were scarce. The berry solved problems that every culture faces when trying to feed families with limited resources. European explorers first documented miracle fruit in 1725. A French cartographer named Chevalier des Marchais observed local populations chewing the berries before meals and recorded that the practice transformed the taste of everything consumed afterward. His reports were met with skepticism in Europe, where no similar phenomenon had ever been observed. The skepticism persisted for over 2 centuries. Scientists who had never experienced the effect personally assumed the reports were exaggerated or misunderstood. The fruit did not grow outside tropical Africa and did not survive long after harvest. Without direct experience, the phenomenon seemed biologically impossible. Modern scientific investigation began only in the 1960s. Improved transportation allowed fresh berries to reach laboratories in Japan, Europe, and America. Researchers who had doubted the historical accounts experienced the effect personally and immediately recognized its significance. The race to commercialize miracle fruit began. Robert Harvey was the American entrepreneur who came closest to bringing miracle fruit to the mass market. Harvey first encountered the berry during business travels in Africa in the late 1960s. He was not a scientist, but he immediately understood what he was experiencing. Here was a natural product that could provide the sensation of sweetness without any of the health consequences of sugar consumption. The market potential seemed unlimited. Diabetes affected millions of Americans who had been told they could never enjoy sweet tastes again. Obesity was becoming a national health crisis driven partly by sugar consumption. Diet products using artificial sweeteners were growing rapidly but faced persistent concerns about chemical safety. A natural berry that solved the same problem without synthetic chemicals could capture enormous market share. Harvey founded the Miraculin Company in 1974 to commercialize miracle fruit. He invested his own money and raised capital from investors who recognized the opportunity. He developed partnerships with research laboratories working on miraculin extraction. He prepared regulatory filings for FDA approval. He leased office space and hired staff. Everything moved toward a planned product launch. The company's strategy focused on diabetic nutrition. Harvey envisioned miracle fruit tablets that diabetics could take before meals to enjoy normal food without blood sugar spikes. The positioning was pharmaceutical rather than recreational. The target market was medical patients with documented need rather than general consumers seeking novelty. Initial responses from the FDA seemed positive. Agency officials expressed interest in the product concept and indicated that approval pathways existed for natural substances with established histories of safe consumption. Harvey believed he was months away from bringing miracle fruit to American consumers. Then everything changed without warning or explanation. The FDA's 1974 decision to classify miracle fruit as an unapproved food additive killed the Miraculin Company almost instantly. The classification meant that miraculin could not be sold in the United States until it completed the same extensive testing required for synthetic food chemicals. This testing process takes years and costs millions of dollars. The requirements assume that substances are potentially dangerous until proven safe through controlled trials. The burden of proof falls entirely on the company seeking approval rather than on regulators claiming harm. Harvey argued that miracle fruit had been consumed safely for centuries. West African populations had eaten the berries for generations, with no documented negative effects. The safety record was longer and more comprehensive than any clinical trial could provide. The traditional use evidence should have qualified miracle fruit for a different regulatory category. The FDA rejected these arguments without detailed explanation. The agency classified miraculin as a food additive rather than a food or a generally recognized as safe substance. The classification appeared arbitrary to Harvey and his team. No scientific evidence supported treating a traditional African fruit as equivalent to a synthetic laboratory chemical. Harvey's investors withdrew immediately after the FDA ruling. The regulatory pathway to market had become years longer and millions of dollars more expensive. The investment calculus no longer worked. Without capital, the company could not continue operations. Miraculin collapsed within months of the FDA decision. The circumstances surrounding the decision raised questions that have never been answered. Harvey reported that his offices were burglarized and files were stolen shortly before the FDA ruling. He believed the sugar industry had influenced the regulatory process through channels that could not be documented. He spent years attempting to prove connections that remained just beyond his reach. The FDA has never explained why miracle fruit received the classification it did. The agency has never addressed the discrepancy between miracle fruit's treatment and the treatment of other traditional foods. The decision stands as regulatory fact, without regulatory justification available for public review. The sugar industry had overwhelming motivation to prevent miracle fruit from reaching American consumers. The American sugar market in 1974 generated tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue. This revenue depended entirely on consumers wanting sweetness and having no alternative source, except sugar and its direct substitutes. Every diabetic who could taste sweetness without sugar represented lost sales. Every dieter who could enjoy sweet foods without calories represented lost sales. Miracle fruit threatened the foundational assumption of the entire industry. The industry's business model assumed that sweetness required their product. Miracle fruit proved that sweetness could be experienced as a modification of perception rather than an addition of substance. The berry made sugar's value proposition obsolete for significant market segments. The artificial sweetener industry had similar motivation. Saccharin, cyclamate, and other synthetic sweeteners were building markets based on providing sweetness without calories. Miracle fruit accomplished the same goal through natural means that avoided the health concerns dogging artificial alternatives. A natural competitor was more threatening than a synthetic one. Industry influence over FDA decisions was well documented during this period. Congressional investigations throughout the 1970s exposed multiple instances where industry funding shaped regulatory outcomes. The revolving door between agency positions and industry employment created conflicts of interest that affected decision-making. The regulatory capture was systemic rather than exceptional. No documentary evidence directly links sugar industry lobbying to the miracle fruit decision. The connections remain circumstantial. The timing is suspicious. The outcome perfectly served industry interests. The regulatory reasoning was never adequately explained, but proof of direct coordination has never emerged despite decades of investigation by researchers and journalists. The absence of proof is not proof of absence. Corporate influence campaigns are designed to avoid documentation. The most effective lobbying leaves no paper trail. The FDA decision may have resulted from legitimate regulatory caution, or it may have resulted from industry manipulation. We may never know which explanation is true. The miracle fruit plant can be grown by anyone willing to provide appropriate conditions. The species grows as a shrub reaching 6 to 15 feet tall at maturity. It produces small white flowers followed by bright red berries approximately the size of coffee beans. A single plant can produce fruit continuously throughout the year under tropical conditions. In temperate climates, the plants can be grown in containers and brought indoors during cold months. The growing requirements are specific but achievable for dedicated growers. Miracle fruit demands acidic soil with pH between 4.5 and 5.8. Standard potting soil is typically too alkaline. Mixing peat moss, pine bark, and sulfur creates appropriate acidity. The plants will not thrive in neutral or alkaline conditions. Humidity requirements reflect tropical origins. Indoor plants benefit from regular misting or humidity trays. Low humidity causes leaf drop and poor fruit production. Maintaining 50% humidity or higher produces best results. Temperature tolerance is limited to tropical ranges. Miracle fruit cannot survive frost. Temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit cause damage. Ideal growing temperatures range from 70 to 85 degrees. Container growing allows relocation between outdoor summer positions and protected indoor winter positions. Fruit production begins approximately 3 to 4 years from seed. Grafted plants may produce fruit sooner. A mature plant yields several hundred berries annually. Each berry contains one seed that can be planted immediately. Fresh seeds germinate readily while dried seeds lose viability quickly. The plants are legal to grow throughout the United States. The FDA ruling affected commercial sale of miraculin as a food additive. Growing plants for personal use faces no restriction. Selling fresh berries occupies legal gray area that small growers have navigated without prosecution. The modern revival of miracle fruit has occurred through channels the FDA does not regulate. Flavor tripping parties became popular in American cities starting around 2008. Participants gathered to consume miracle fruit tablets or fresh berries, then sample arrays of sour and bitter foods. Lemons become candy, hot sauce becomes sweet chili, beer becomes chocolate stout. The experience has spread through word of mouth and social media despite zero commercial advertising. The tablets sold at these events occupy regulatory gray areas. Sellers market them as novelty items rather than food additives. Enforcement has been minimal against products positioned as entertainment rather than nutrition. Diabetic communities have rediscovered miracle fruit independently. Online forums share information about sourcing berries, growing plants, and using miracle fruit to enjoy foods that would otherwise be forbidden. The community knowledge that FDA suppression scattered has reassembled through internet connections that regulators cannot easily control. Scientific research has continued despite American restrictions. Japanese researchers have maintained active miraculin investigation programs. The protein has been expressed in transgenic tomatoes, potentially allowing miraculin production in temperate agriculture. The FDA classification remains unchanged after 50 years. No company has invested the resources necessary to complete the approval process. The cost-benefit calculation that killed Miralin still applies. The regulatory barrier stands because no one can afford to challenge it. The miracle fruit berry that West African families chew before meals represents possibility that powerful interests have worked to suppress. A diabetic grandmother could taste birthday cake sweetness while eating only fresh berries. A child fighting obesity could enjoy treats that contain no sugar and no artificial chemicals. A cancer patient whose chemotherapy destroys taste perception could experience flavor that makes eating tolerable again. The applications extend to anyone whose health requires avoiding sugar, but whose humanity craves sweetness. The FDA made sure these applications would never be tested at scale in America. They classified a traditional fruit consumed safely for centuries as equivalent to an untested synthetic chemical. They required years of expensive trials for a product with longer safety records than any trial could generate. They created barriers that only companies with massive resources could overcome, ensuring that those companies would be the same ones threatened by miracle fruit's success. The sugar industry has generated trillions of dollars since 1974. The diabetes epidemic has exploded across the same period. The obesity crisis has transformed American health. The artificial sweetener market has grown and fractured amid constant safety controversies. Every trend that miracle fruit could have addressed has worsened while the berry remained commercially unavailable. The plants still grow in West Africa, where they have always grown. The berries still transform sour into sweet, as they have for countless generations. The miraculin still binds to taste receptors through mechanisms that evolution perfected long before humans existed. The biology does not require FDA approval to function. You can grow miracle fruit in your own home starting today. The seeds are legal to purchase, the plants are legal to cultivate, the berries are legal to consume. The only thing that remains illegal is selling miraculin as an additive in processed foods. Personal use faces no restriction whatsoever. 1 berry, 2 hours of transformed taste, 0 sugar consumed. The FDA made sure you would never find this in stores. They never imagined you would learn to grow it yourself. Now you know what they blocked and exactly why they blocked it. If this opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every single like and share spreads what they tried to bury for 50 years. See you in the next one.